Looking for a way to improve sport-specific training with your athletes? Then you have to check out Blaze Pods. Blaze Pods is a neurocognitive reaction training intervention that can be incorporated into your sessions for patients throughout the treatment spectrum. Visit blazepod.com, enter code EverythingPT at checkout, and save 15% off your order today. This podcast is sponsored by CSMI, the maker of the HUMAC Norm isokinetic system. Purchase a new or refurbished machine, or you can even upgrade an existing system to bring it up to date with all the latest testing and training applications. Please visit csmisolutions.com to view all of their available products, including the HUMAC Norm isokinetic system, the HUMAC Balance portable computerized balance system, and Sportswear Online. CSMI. Better data leads to better results.
Hello, and welcome to the Everything PT podcast with Matt Taylor and Daniel Bodkin. Please do not consider anything you hear to be medical advice. Just a couple of guys ranting about everything PT. Enjoy the show. Hello again, and welcome to the Everything PT podcast. This is episode number 10 here. I'm with my co-host, Daniel. Daniel, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. I was just in Utah the last couple of days working with the clinic. I spent from 7 to 4 doing all things isokinetics and showing them every little application on the machine. So it was a busy day, but I mean, you can't beat that scenery out there.
Sweet, man. I just spent a week in Utah vacationing with my wife. We probably passed planes there for a minute, but what a beautiful place. It was awesome. But Daniel, we got some news here, right? We just picked up another sponsorship with a company called Vald, which is pretty exciting.
They have some great products, and we might even have somebody from Vald to come on and talk to us a little bit, but I'm excited to learn. I don't have much experience with them, but the little I see, I definitely want to see it a little bit more. That's for sure.
They got some pretty cool objective testing equipment. We use their BFR cuffs. They're without any kind of lines. When you think about I know your mind starts racing, right?
Yeah.
So pretty excited about it. But hey, we have a guest today too, which is exciting.
Who do we have with us?
We have JW Matheson from Montana. He's in Montana today. So welcome, JW. How you doing, sir?
Doing great. Thank you, Matt and Daniel. I appreciate you having me on the podcast. You were making me think. I love Utah. So did you get to Bryce or Zion at all? Or?
I didn't. When I travel, I fly in Sunday evening. Usually build the machine. Monday morning, teach the staff until I have to fly out Monday night. So it's always a real quick in and out. We have a 3-year-old and a 4.5-year-old. So I have to be able to be daddy.
Yeah, no, I hear you there. We did a fun trip. I have a 13-year-old and almost 14 and then a 19-year-old. But last year we spent a week at Bryce and Zion and just did all the Slot Canyon hiking and it was in March, so it was still a little cold, but it was just fantastic. Some rappelling and had a great time.
Rappelling. Nice, JW.
Yes.
So my wife and I flew into Vegas, took a car, hopped down to Zion for 3 days. We could have stayed in Zion for a long time, but we ended up going to Bryce on that famous 3-mile hike around there. Incredible. Then we went to Moab for a few days, did some off-roading, which terrified my wife, quite frankly. But we had a really good time. Went to Canyonlands, went to Arches, and it was a beautiful part of the country. It really was.
Yeah, it is. I still think it's kind of a hidden gem, and it's not too hard to get to. I mean, you can fly into Salt Lake and then rent a car and see a lot of country. Yeah,
for sure. So JW, this is our 10th episode. In true PT Inquest fashion, do you have anything on the number 10 makes you think of?
I don't, but I actually do have some, because you're in Charleston, right?
Charleston, West Virginia. Yep.
Yeah. So I did not know this, but there's some really interesting fun facts about Charleston, West Virginia. Did you know it was kind of, you guys were kind of the cake eaters back in colonial times. You were really wealthy. Do you know the tie into golf? Do you know that?
No, please.
The first golf course in the United States of America was in Charleston, Virginia. And I need to call up my page here. Let's look
now
at this.
Charleston, West Virginia.
Yeah, 1787. 1787, the first golf club was established. And then, have you heard of Dr. Alexander Garden?
You are dropping some bombs on. No, I have not.
All right. He's a Charleston physician who first imported the Cape jasmine flower from South Africa about 1754, but the flower was renamed the gardenia after Dr. Garden.
Wow. So, that's fascinating. The West Virginia has an incredible golf course. It's a pro course, the Greenbrier. They have an event there every year, but other than that, I'm out of the golf loop. So, but
it looks like a fun place. The carriage ride. Have you taken a carriage ride?
No carriage rides. Lots of hiking. Lots of beautiful fishing. Known for the whitewater and the deep south. Some of the best whitewater rafting in the entire country or the world. Some say. Yeah,
and supposedly because you have the two rivers, right? So I learned all this 30 minutes ago. So the elk and how do you say it? Colony? How do you say that?
So if you're from around Charleston, it's Kanawha. It's kind of weird, but I very much say Kanawha though.
Okay.
Yeah, old Indian name there.
So yeah, so nothing about the number. I mean, the 10. But some fun facts about Charleston, West Virginia.
But that was way better than a fascinating stat about number 10.
I had a stat about number 10, but I'm just going to leave it in my pocket after that.
Awesome. All right, JW. So you're involved with so much. I read about you a little bit here, and you're involved with research. You're doing the co-host of PT Inquest, heavily involved in the APTA and sports orthopedic research section. So what are you doing today? What's your day-to-day stuff look like? And how are you being used, man?
Well, in 2020, I sold I was co-owner of a private practice. And so I sold that private practice to a larger orthopedic group within the Twin Cities. In fact, I think they're either the first or second largest orthopedic group with 110 orthopedists and growing. That number is not even correct now, but so did that in 2020, kind of right in the middle of the pandemic. And we kept all our staff. And so now I'm managing the clinic in Hudson, Wisconsin. Okay. And then we're also in the process, which I'll come back to later. Because it's so fun. It's coming full circle. I'm the orthopedic residency director. So we're starting a sports and orthopedic residency and going through I always laugh when I say this, but the ABPT-RFE accreditation. So there's got to be an easier way to say that. But, so it's been fun. So Brandon Schomburg, who's another manager within the organization, and myself, he's the sports director. I'm the ortho director, and it's been good. So we're about a year and a half in, and our first residents are starting mid-July, and then we have site visits in November, and hopefully we'll get accredited. But I think we now have 18 physical therapy locations and 33 clinic locations, 187 PTs, PTAs. You add the hand therapists, we're over 220, and then well over 120 physicians. So
that's awesome,
a large group. So day-to-day stuff is just some admin. We took our clinic location have taken 8 students in the last year. So we almost always have a student, and typically they're on my schedule, but all the therapists in our practice do a great job of mentoring. So they're almost like clinic students. I might be their CI on paper, but they have 8 other clinicians that they're constantly working with. And so so still having fun after 26 years, still having fun. I don't feel as old as I probably look, or when I say 26 years, but gosh, Pete, what a great, I spoke to some freshmen in college. I speak once a semester, and I'm just so grateful that, I mean, PT is such a fun profession because it's so varied. You have so many opportunities, and so I've had wonderful opportunities. I was looking at both your CVs before I came on, and I mean, you've both done amazing things, and that's what's unique. I was thinking, gosh, even if you're 2 years out and you're just hammering 40 hours a week seeing patients, there's always opportunities to, even if it's just, recommending a podcast to a colleague, reviewing a journal article with a colleague, working with a mentor a little bit. I mean, it's just, the profession is so, it's just all that's so valuable. So I don't want to I want to emphasize, but not, you look at a CV, and I've had some wonderful mentors and opportunities, but even on a small scale, I think that's possible within the profession. And that's what makes me excited about the profession. We seem to be continuing to grow, and I love the enthusiasm of the new grads. Many of them just got their licenses this week. And so, yeah.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, one thing you brought up, and you're managing, right? I was a staff PT for I think 4 years, and then when I moved to Nashville, I took over a small clinic as director. And one of the things, it's a completely different role. And now, Matt, he's a small business owner. He's owning his clinic. Just a quick question: about what % of your day would you say is spent on the administrative side versus the treatment side?
Oh, now a lot more. I mean, I'm probably like, I with the student leaving this week, I'll knock my schedule down to just Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're probably from 10 to 4. I'm seeing patients. I do some industrial med and things like that they'll squeeze in on the schedule throughout. But yeah, I mean, right now, unfortunately, that's why I'm so excited about the residency and things, is because it keeps me. It would be so easy to leave patient care. I mean, I'm at the point now where, unless I work for it, I have to cover a soccer tournament this weekend as sports med coverage, and so unless it's those things that keep me engaged. But right now it's probably 70-30, and it's varied over the 26 years in different models. Yeah, management's hard too. So after running the private practice for 7.5 years, I feel much more comfortable now because of all the mistakes I made in the past. And so it isn't, I would say that out of all the things I've done in my PT career, and it's still something that does not come naturally. I think I feel much more comfortable treating a patient than I do managing right now a staff of 17 or 18. So, yeah.
Wow. It's awesome, JW. So I realize now, and just running a very small operation, nothing like what you guys are running there. We got a couple therapists here in Charleston, and I realize that treating patients is a luxury. It really is, once you get to that point. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you really start out, head down, working hard, seeing a lot of patients, and then transition over the course of your career. And now are you in like that giving back to the next generation and trying to educate
Well, I hope so. Very much. I mean, very much so. I mean, I'm 51. I feel like I'm excited about this role in the next 10 years, being more focused on management, mentorship. I would go crazy if I didn't do some patient care, and yeah. So I just think that keeps me honest as well. And so I mean, absolutely. And I mean, I know you, and we'll, again, we can, I think one of your questions was specifically about George Davies, but, talk about, it's when I started working with him, he was about the age I am now. And so, it's really remarkable. Just you think about paying it forward and the need to do that within the profession. And as much as we can complain about the profession at times, the future is really bright. And I, after beating my head against the wall for many, many years, I think the only way to change, lasting change in the profession is the new grads, is the incoming new grads. And I used to do the math, but I think there's about 250 PT programs out there, maybe 260 now. But if you figure that the average class size is 40, although some classes are getting up around 60 or even more than that, what every year, what are you graduating? I don't know.
It's a lot.
20,000 PT students, a lot. I mean, or more. And in 10 years, that'll turn over the profession. So change happens a lot slower than I would like for it to, but it does happen. And so I think that's what brings me into work now is just the enthusiasm of the young, new grads, new therapists that have been out less than 7 years. Just, that's what brings me into work.
Awesome, man.
Yeah. So for any of those young therapists that are listening to this podcast, they might not know. I mean, you guys certainly have a lot more listeners and viewers than we do, but you're on a very successful podcast, and I've actually been listening to it for years. I think I've hit almost every episode in your back catalog.
I'm so sorry.
But you were doing podcasting before it was cool to do podcasting. How did that all come about?
Well, first of all, that's because we're not cool. I mean, that's right. We were ahead of our time. So, prom has just happened. Do you have, high school proms? It's prom season. Do you run into that? Yeah. So we're seeing patients in the clinic, and you always have to talk to them about prom knee. So it's the basketball player that got their ACL reconstruction, and he or she's, finally able to do some stuff, but darn well that they're going to be on that knee for, all night long, and it'll swell up the next day, and they come in panicked. And so I call it prom knee, and I try to preemptively talk about it. But I always say, hey, I never went to my high school prom because it always fell on the same weekend as the Star Trek convention. But so Eric and I are birds of a feather. So that's why we started the podcast. But no, I mean, that's sort of serious. And I'm wondering, people probably were like, did he really go to the Star Trek convention?
For those few of you that have listened to the other episodes, I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. And I try to drop a Star Wars reference here and there as many times as I can, but you kind of trumped me with Star Trek. So
right.
I'll take it.
So Eric and I were colleagues in the at that time the sports section, now the American Academy of Sports Physical Therapy, and so we knew each other, and we were active within this section, and we would we would always see each other at the business meeting, and we had this common interest in pseudoscience and why PTs do silly things, and we started talking, and just a friendship formed. And the podcast was really simply just one time we hit the record button. So it was early on in the where you could start to do some virtual work. He was in Oregon, I was in the Twin Cities metro area, and we would start to just meet that way and talk about things and talk about the PT profession. And so it just one day, I mean, I seriously think we just hit record one time, and that was it. And so that's really, Eric was very ahead of his time. He had something called the PT podcast, where he interviewed George Davies, Rob Mansky, Todd Ellenbecker, those individuals. And I think he did, they're still up there. And I think he did maybe 20 episodes of that. But it was back in 2012, and I did an episode with him at the APTA private practice section meeting. He drove up to Seattle from Portland, and shortly after that, we just started having these meetings and started recording, and that's how PT Inquest was formed. So it's really Eric's baby, and I was really just the sidekick. And you said we have many listeners. We used to have 9 listeners, but my mom, she's 76, and she goes, I just don't understand this, and I just can't listen to it anymore. So I think we're down to 7 listeners now.
Hey, all you rehab specialists out there. Do you have an isokinetic dynamometer just sitting around your clinic not being used? Little known fact, isokinetic machines that aren't used regularly are at higher risk for bouts of sadness. Help your machine out and take CSMI's newest CEU course, Isokinetics 101 online, created by me, Daniel Bodkin, and learn how to use all the exercise and testing applications available on your machine. With new and exciting rehab techniques in your toolbox, your sad isokinetic machine can become an active member of the rehab team again and regain its happiness. Isokinetics 101 online by CSMI has been approved for 8 credit hours for athletic trainers, physical therapists, and physical therapy assistants. Contact your state board for details on specific requirements. This course is available at humacnorm.com/courses/isokinetics-101.
One thing that you bring to that podcast is puns, dad jokes, random facts. And that's one of the things that I loved about listening to it is I'm not just going to listen to 2 guys talk about some boring research. And I used it on my, long commute to and from the clinic. It wasn't just a boring podcast. It's fun to listen to. Having those little moments makes it easier to digest.
Well, I think it makes it real. I think, so I'm real active in Rotary. So, the local Rotary Club about 10 years ago, I became sergeant at arms. I can't remember, maybe I was sergeant. I've been in the club about 10 years. So I think 8 years ago, I became sergeant at arms. And Rotary is apolitical and non-religious. And so I started doing some fun fact. And so I would walk around and we do this thing called Happy Bucks where each Rotarian puts in $1 or more and says, I'm happy for my daughter got married last weekend, or I had a new baby grandson, we went to Montana last week and had a great time or something, but always something very, or just the nice weather, but it's how we raise some money. And so, quarterly we'd raise several $100 that we would give to a local charity. And so I became the guy going around and collecting the Happy Bucks from each person. And so I would always start out with a historical fact for the day and then a dad joke. Because second grade jokes are about all you can tell to make sure you're not being, you're staying out of trouble. And so then it's become, in the clinic, I'm known for that too. And we have actually dad jokes of the week up on the clinic board. And then on Twitter, I was getting in all these Twitter arguments. And so I finally just started just telling stupid jokes on Twitter because I was kind of done with Twitter. And so, I've become known as just a dad joke or pun guy. But it does add some comedic relief. And sometimes I do it just to bother Eric to see, because he rarely laughs. And so if I can make him laugh, that's a good thing.
You're doing.
But also now it's become very important to create these jokes that are tied together, because it's a silly pun. I used to work for the orange juice factory, but I got canned because I couldn't concentrate. That's funny, but it's not really funny. And so you have to tie it together. So CSM, maybe 5 years ago or maybe longer than that now, but was in Anaheim, so Disneyland. And so Eric and I were riding up the elevator and, we saw this mom with her 2 daughters, and they were both dressed up as princesses. And one was Cinderella, but what's the princess from Frozen? Elsa. And so I looked at the girl of Cinderella, and she must have been 4 or 5. And I said, do you know Cinderella is horrible at soccer? And you could see her jaw drop, but I'm like, she's horrible. And I said, and her mom goes, well, why is that? And I go, well, she's always running away from the ball. And her coach is a pumpkin. And mom got really mad and started yelling at me. I'm like, if the shoe fits, And then the second daughter looked at me and started crying and goes, I hate you. And I said, well, you're just going to have to let it go. So
did you tell her Santa Claus wasn't real too, JW, while you were at it?
Yeah. So
those were good.
It's if you can put a whole bunch into it, then that's where I'm starting. You can kind of come up with a dad joke stand-up routine, or and I have one. So that's one, and then I have another one about going to the furniture store trying to get stools for the kitchen table and her kitchen counter, and the guy gave me a whole bunch of stool samples. But anyway, yeah, no. So I think it is. We're talking about boring research, and so I think if you can add some quips in there. We've had some people complain that sometimes we're too much. We try to keep the intro to 6-7 minutes or less.
Well, they can just fast forward it too.
Right,
if they really want to.
Right, just go to.
Not that anyone has ever done that.
I'm sure many have. So you were listening to us on our commute. I'm surprised you just didn't close your eyes and turn the wheel to the nearest ditch.
Well, I would alternate between you guys, audiobook Game of Thrones and audiobook Star Wars. So,
all right.
So JW, I heard a pun a couple years ago. Shout out to my buddy Brian Bear, but it was a good PT one for you. So, so this guy went to the bank and asked the teller to check his balance, and then she pushed him and he fell over. So
that's nice. I was gonna
enjoy that.
I did. I'm losing interest with that one, but I could check it out. I mean, but yeah, you could take that one to the bank. I mean,
we have a joke of the week in our clinic, and it just everyone's in pain. They got swelling in their knee or their leg or their shoulder, and it's a nice little break from reality just to keep it lighthearted and just laugh a little bit through it. So I think the joke's a nice touch.
Well, and I think laughter is good medicine. And if you can get a patient to smile, and the routine in the clinic is we do a lot. So we were, based on just the environment, if you have 2 patients we have 3 tables in our gym. We had 2, and then with COVID lightening up a little bit, we put the 3rd one back. But Luke, for example, will set me up. I'll be walking by, and he goes, JW, didn't you get addicted to the hokey pokey when you were younger? And I said, oh yeah, it was a horrible couple of years. And I said, but luckily I turned myself around, and Luke goes, yeah, and I said, yep, I know that's what it's all about. And I mean, so, that kind of stuff is fun. We have a record player. We have a patient bringing in vinyl now. So they'll bring in their favorite record and play it. And, I haven't been very good about it, but I sometimes tweet Vinyl Wednesday. I think the last one was Bob Marley Legends, and so we'll have that playing on the clinic record player, but it's great. I mean, you put Fleetwood Mac on, and you'll have this 55-year-old individual, and he's in a lot of back pain, and suddenly his face lightens up, and you take a pause, and he goes, I had that album, and I said, well, when was that? And I think that kind of communication makes a difference.
Well, a big part of what you talk about a lot on your podcast is the therapeutic alliance, making that bond with the patient, and how those non-specific effects of just the environment, being there, communicating with that patient, can make a difference. Can you tell us a little bit about those non-specific effects?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, relates back to when Eric and I first met. So we all know this. You've been, whether it's in your practice or whether when you were a student on your clinical affiliations or rotations, you've seen a PT that just had magic hands. They could grab a hold of the shoulder, they could grab a hold of the knee, or mobilize the spine, and they just seem to have just a skill set there. And then you see the same type of patient with another therapist who did not have that skill set, but just could connect with that patient really well. Both patients got better. I see him 6 to 8 visits over 6 weeks. So what's happening? Why, what's the mechanism underlying that? And Eric and I always keep coming back to that is what's the mechanism? And then you get really, and then at the same time, I personally was getting really frustrated. I had my SCS, I'd gone back and got my OCS, and I take these board exams, and I knew the research well enough that I could say, yeah, this is the answer you want me to check, but it's not right. But, I can see that. And so it became really, why are these patients getting better? And is there, and then in 2012, Dr. Maxie Misiak from Canada did a great article in part of her PhD work. And she has now 4 articles and fantastic researcher. but it was on the common factors. And so I dove into that. And so in psychology, bear with me just a second, you go to your therapist and you're depressed or you have anxiety, and that therapist can use many different tools, active commitment therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectic behavioral therapy. I mean, they have all these tools, very similar to PTs have a lot of tools in their toolbox. But there's a Dr. Bruce Wampold out of Madison, Wisconsin, has talked about this as well. But there seems to be this idea that it probably matters less what the actual intervention is and more about these common factors. And so therapeutic alliance is one of them. And that's, does the patient share common bond, goals, and tasks with their therapist? So whether that's mental health therapy, whether it's physical therapy, do you agree? So when they leave that first visit and you give them that prognostic statement, I expect us to see about 50% improvement in your pain over the next 4 weeks. I'd like for you to come in once a week or twice a week. And this is our plan. Do you get the buy-in? Are they aligned, or is there an alliance there? Not a rebel alliance from Star Wars, but is there an alliance, or a working alliance, it's often called, between you and the patient? And that's really critical. And so knowing that, you start to look at the research, and you start to say, it's like a house of cards. It starts to fall down because you see much of what has been done in the past as tooth fairy science, meaning we could look at the tooth fairy. We could do a very randomized controlled trial that's very rigid. We could look at if patients that were randomized to receive their money in a Ziploc bag versus just under the pillow, and look at patient satisfaction. I mean, you could look at sociodemographics and how much money was paid. You could do some very valid research on around the tooth fairy, but it ignores the concept that the tooth fairy, sorry, but it doesn't exist. So I hope I didn't have, probably I lost half your listeners there, but the idea is whether it's in psychology, and this is sometimes called the dodo effect or common factors, the idea that it's more how the interventions applied, and it suddenly starts to make you realize that that's why it probably matters little what manual therapy intervention you're doing, whether you're doing mobilization with movement, right? Our structural ideas of that, I think, are flawed, but you are helping the patient, and it's because you're maximizing these non-specific or contextual effects, which I think are critical, and you should do that in every patient encounter from the time they walk into the clinic. Your front office representative needs to smile and say, "Welcome to the clinic today. Who are you?" and problem solve, and they're the directors of first impressions, and if that doesn't go well, your therapy session is probably not going to go well. And then the environment, the vinyl record players, the dad jokes, the friendly environment, clean, secure, safe space, all that matters. And so when we start to control for those things, we start to see less of an individual effect of these actual interventions. And so that's really what I like. When I look at a study, I'm very concerned about the methodology now, because have they controlled for these factors? And if they haven't, then I think they just ignored the contextual effects. And there was a really good systematic review by Chen. I'm trying to think, I think it was an arthritis and rheumatism or best arthritis and rheumatological research, but I can send you the link if you want the actual paper. But they looked at all the interventions for NeoA, but they controlled for the contextual effects, and certain things like injection or more invasive techniques, or and we've seen this in the placebo surgery studies too. The more elaborate the placebo, the more you're equating these contextual effects. The more, and I don't think placebos are powerful. I mean, some people would disagree with me, but we're still having a hard time defining how do you define placebo, because I think it's a little different in PT than it is in medicine or pharmacology research. But Yeah, so you start to look at these contextual effects and non-specific effects, and I think some people are disenfranchised by that, but to me, it was a huge relief because it is taken the weight off my shoulders of it, because I've answered that question. Why do something, why does anything and everything seem to work sometimes? And that doesn't, so now the research should be focused on, yes, let's try to be more effective. Let's try to, be cost effective. And how can we maximize these non-specific effects and apply, and then once we level that and level the playing field with that, then let's research these interventions we're applying and try to determine which one's most effective and which one works best for this patient. And then recognize too that's where you bring in the individual patient then and say, do some shared decision making on top of that. So JW, I feel like I've been talking a very long time. That was
can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yes.
There? So I find, and thinking about just our clinic and the painstakingly process to keep it clean, make sure towel laundry is done, and that, everyone at the front desk is smiling. We're all to work early. There's an awful lot that goes into that, the sidewalks are swept and all that fun stuff. It's just so hard to measure, I think. So maybe I should read some of your research that you guys have done, because I find that it's probably going to be really challenging to measure those kind of effects.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's why we've been trying to figure out, if you look at manual therapy research, I just tweeted about Jewel Rothstein in back in, I think it was 90 or 91 December issue of PTJ, Physical Therapy Journal. So that's what, 30 years ago now, 31 years ago. And he talks about this. And the whole issue's on the current status of manual therapy research. And the challenge then in 1991 was we've got to figure out the mechanisms. And the Orthopedic Academy just released a home study course looking at the mechanisms of manual therapy. And so we're finally getting there, but my goodness, it's 31 years and
quite the journey.
So
gotcha, so man. A situation that a lot of young clinicians are going to run into. Let's say they take their first job, they're out there working for 6 months, they got a great mentor, and then they get a patient who is a return patient, but from a previous clinician. And that previous clinician did a lot of passive things. They did a lot of heat, ultrasound, stretching, manual therapy, and then ice and stim. And, how do you go from, how can that, new clinician say, that's what they did in the past. That's what you liked. But, how can you incorporate what you believe, the interventions you think are going to be best for them, while keeping that good alliance and rapport with the patient?
That's a really good question. And the short answer is it's really difficult. From personally, I've really made mistakes in that area. So in 2001, I was resident number 5. So if you ask George Davies, I'm number 5. And so I was resident number 5. That year we got accredited. So we were the first public credentialed sports residency in 2001. West Point was the only other one, but it was private. So we can say we were the first public. And so it's fun 22 years later to be doing a residency, but I had a severe, almost fatal case of post-residency syndrome, because you're so jazzed up. And so that your students, you've had great clinicals. And so you're so jazzed up because you've seen the right way or what you view as the best practice way to do things. And then suddenly you're in your first job and things are not that way. And I moved around a lot. I think I had, now, if you count I think 3 or 4 jobs within 5 years, because I just had this post-residency syndrome. And I wish now I would have been more accommodating and just been patient. So I think that's part of it. So I would recommend that. And so try to create change, but that may mean you're having to do some of those things that you don't want to do. And so that's the clinic environment. Now, the one-on-one patient interaction, couple things I've done is I have you're back here in PT. We know that you've had that in the past. I have more information now than your other PT did. So I would like to do this and this and then, I would like to do these things and put a hold on those others for a while and see what we do. Can we do that for 2 or 3 visits? Again, shared decision-making, trying to do that much softer sell than I used to do in the past. But I think you're right. You risk rupturing. In psychology, they call it rupturing, which sounds horrible. Rupturing the therapeutic alliance, and that certainly can happen. I still have patients today that if they call and want certain interventions, I mean, the craniosacral therapy, I'll send them to the practitioner up the street. We just don't do that. And if they're really sold on that, I don't want to waste their time.
For what we do at our clinic, if we get someone, this is a just slightly different topic here, but if we get someone who's really excited about, we'll say, instrument assisted soft tissue mobilization, and like that's going to be the thing that gets them in the door so we can see them, we'll say, okay, we'll do that, but we do it for 5 to 10 minutes, and then we fill the rest of the session with what we actually feel is going to benefit them. But could insert your modality of choice, could make an argument for it.
Right. I think that's fair. I think that's reasonable. And I don't think it's, I've lost a couple patients when I was more hard edged and said, no, we don't do that here. And again, it's just patience. Rarely now do I get anyone asking for ultrasound. And oftentimes they haven't, it's been 10 years since they had PT. Or a substantial amount of time, and so that's easy. I can go, gosh, I do, I kind of put my Columbo face on, and no one knows who Columbo is anymore. But I go, gosh, we used to do that all the time. I used to do that 6 or 7 times a day, but you know what? It just didn't seem to help. It's just some superficial heating. Research hasn't supported it. So although we used to do it a lot, you'll find a lot of PT clinics now that don't have a machine, and it's just really fallen out of favor. I guess I could do it if you wanted to it, but we don't have a machine here. But so that's easy. And then real quickly, the harm in all this is, one could simply say, what's the harm? What's the harm in doing these things? And in PT, luckily, there's not the harm of an unnecessary surgery, or we're not exposing the patient to unwanted radiation and things like that. But the harm is it perpetuates this myth. And so as a profession as a whole, don't we have some ethical obligation to do what's best practice? And so that's my frustration. And so in the sporting world, is kind of a catch-22, because if it's a professional player, there's no insurance involved, you're throwing the kitchen sink at them. But then what happens when they're no longer playing professional sports, and it's 5 years later and they go expecting the same thing. And so Eric and I spend a lot of time off the podcast talking about this. And I think it's these are really good discussions, and maybe the short answer is we just need more discussion within the profession about it.
So JW, I did some thoughts and some research on you. Hudson PT, 22,000 square foot facility, right? And what a place. I know that you have an isokinetic machine in there, because I listened to PT Inquest, And so what else is in there? I'm kind of just want to walk through the door and take a tour.
So I'm glad you asked. So the PT space is only 5,000 square feet.
Oh, okay.
But exciting, since we sold in 2020, next April, we'll be moving into 18,000 square feet of just PT and OT space.
That's awesome.
So in a large medical building, collaborating with the local physician group that has built this Mongo building. And so we're excited about that. And that'll be more, I joke and say that's more brass and marble, but our clinic is a metal building built in 1987. It was originally, we're on the same footprint as 2 sheets of ice, Hudson High School state hockey champions. So we share the parking lot with the 2 hockey rinks, but then our building was built originally as a roller rink back in 1987. So, but it was we wanted space for this because the local soccer association needed indoor training space. So we have 10,500 square feet of artificial turf. And when we bought the building and put a lot of money into the renovation, the only way we could do that was with the help of the local soccer program. So we went into the build knowing that we had a 5-year tenant. And so they were a permanent renter. And then the back 4,000 square feet was when we did our strength and performance. We had 2 high school contracts. And so we had that from 2013 to 2019. And then knowing we were going to sell to TCO, the local high school did a $100 million referendum. They did a huge rebuild of their high school. And so they wanted to, I mean, they could offer it free and do it internally. So we knew we were losing that contract. But and then we sold the building. So sold the building last year, but was a great investment, probably a better investment than the private practice itself. But
Probably, yeah.
It was nice in the sense that, I mean, I would recommend that if you're thinking about a private practice, if you own your building and you're the renter, that's nice. You have 2 separate LLCs, and I mean, I could get into that in more detail, but it allowed us a lot of opportunities, and so we're excited about this new space. But our current space is fantastic. We've had the soccer is only there November 1st to May 1st. Even though they pay us monthly rent, which again is helpful from the business side, but all that space is available for PT throughout the day. So
It's awesome, man. I just think about we have 3,000 square feet, and I know how expensive it was and to renovate, and I can only imagine a job that's 6 times that size, so it's pretty awesome.
Well, JW, thank you again for coming in and chatting with us today. For the listeners out there, how can they find you? How can people get in touch with you?
They can certainly get a hold of me at EIP Consult. So EIP and then just the word consult at Twitter or Instagram. So that's probably the easiest way.
And what's the name of the podcast again?
The PT Inquest podcast?
Yeah, PT Inquest.
Yeah.
And I think 237 episodes?
Yeah.
And you can listen.
Wow.
You can go all the way back and listen to every one of those. So
if
a lot of content.
If you want to interrogate someone, you can just put a light on them and make them listen to maybe 5 episodes. They'll tell you everything.
Everything you want to know. JW, thank you. Everyone out there, Mom and Sally, if you're listening, thank you. And we'll see you guys next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Matt and Dan.